All right, good afternoon, everyone, parents and students. I'm Ken Jang, Committee Chair for Tutoring for a Good Cause, and today's webinar will be on various topics relating to the college application process and on fundraising for TGC.
Good afternoon, I'm Candice Wang, Communication Co-Chair for Tutoring for a Good Cause. 大家好，我是王小优 Candice， 负责后台技术支持。欢迎来到 TGC 升学讲座。本讲座将为大家介绍关于申请大学的准备及建议，还包括了 TGC 的网站升级募捐。
As you may know, TGC is a 501c3 nonprofit organization that was founded in the midst of the pandemic, dedicated to providing peer-to-peer free live instruction for K-8 students in need in all areas, including but not limited to academics, the arts, chess, foreign language, and sports. In the past year, 650 volunteers from all around the world participated in our program, and currently we have 520 volunteers providing over 2,100 hours of community service per month for students all over the world.
如大家所熟知 ，Tutoring for a Good Cause (TGC) 是一个501c3非营利组织，致力于通过网络教育平台为 K 至8年级的学生提供免费的同伴授课指导，无论您位处于何处。作为一个在疫情期间成立和发扬的组织，我们通过线上平台提供包括艺术、国际象棋、外语和体育等不限于学术方面的课程。在过去的1年里，来自世界各地的650名志愿者参与了我们组织。目前，我们有520名志愿者，每月为世界各地的学生提供超过2100小时的社区服务。
Our mission is to inspire, educate, and empower students through challenging and enjoyable lessons, while raising community awareness and creating a sense of belonging.
我们的使命是通过具有挑战性和令人愉快的课程来激励、教育和赋予学生能力，同时提高社区意识，并创造归属感。
You can see more of our work on our website and on our YouTube channel, both of which will be shared in the chat. While on the topic of our website, we are also trying to raise funds to improve our website so as to strengthen TGC's legitimacy as an organization and increase our educational outreach. So please consider donating.
我们的网站和 YouTube 账号将会在 chat 里面跟大家分享，上面会有更多关于 TGC 的资讯和介绍。说到了网站呢，我们也在努力筹集资金来改善我们的网站，请大家考虑捐款来支持我们，给大家提供更好的资源和提升 TGC 对高年级学生申请大学的帮助。
Today's speaker is Miranda Lin. For 2 years, she has tutored with TGC in a wide variety of subjects, and last year completed more than 100 hours of volunteer work, winning the President's Volunteer Service Award. She also served as the chair of the TGC committee from 2021 to 2022. Starting this fall, she will be attending Barnard College at Columbia University. In this webinar, Miranda will help shed light on the college application process, as well as cover some tips for high school course selection, excelling on the SAT, and more.
今天我们特邀秋季将入读哥伦比亚大学 Barnard College 的 TGC Committee 2021至2022 Chair Miranda Lin 来给大家做 Zoom 实时讲座，给大家介绍 SAT 的准备、大学及专业的选择和申请，给各义工未来规划提些建议。Miranda 作为一个品学兼优的优秀义工，她在职期间领导完成了 TGC 新义工上岗指南，并身体力行地带最有挑战的课程，即使12年级也完成了每年100小时的义工服务，并获得义工服务总统奖。她的成长经历会给大家带来启发。
Now, let's welcome Miranda.
现在让我们有请 Miranda.
Hi guys, thanks everyone for coming and thanks for having me today. Thank you Ken and Candice for the introduction. So I'm going to share my screen now. So before I start, I want to provide some disclaimers. So first of all, college admissions is a gamble. So there's no linear formula or set rules that will decide where you get in or where you don't get in.
有
And
点小声啊。
is something wrong?
She wants you to raise your voice a little.
Oh, okay. So, all right. So all the advice I'm about to give you is based solely on my experience. So, like whether or not you trust that, that's up to you. So this is solely based on my experience. I'm not a professional, and I have only gone through this once by myself. So, having the same higher or lower stats will not guarantee that you have the same acceptances or rejections from the same colleges or universities as myself. And I have no knowledge of QuestBridge. I have no knowledge of Coalition, and I know that these are two other application platforms that are getting more and more popular with each year. But everything that you see here will be based on the Common App. Now, I have no knowledge of or experience with the ACT. I took the SAT once, but I've never studied for and never attempted to take the ACT. So I have no experience with that. And so this is something else I'd like to emphasize, that if you're looking to get into top 5 schools or Harvard, Yale, Princeton, Stanford, MIT, those sorts, I don't have experience with that, because I like to make it very clear now that my range and skill level is slightly above average, and I tried my best to get into top 20 schools, but I have no experience with any top 5s or getting into any of those schools. And the last thing is I'm going to Barnard, and I know Candace and Ken mentioned that it is Barnard College of Columbia University. That is true. Barnard is an undergraduate college of Columbia and is considered to be part of the Ivy League, because the Ivy League is a sports league. But the admissions process is separate. So when you apply to Barnard, you do not apply to Columbia College or Columbia Engineering. And I thought I would make that very clear now. Like, yes, it is an undergraduate college of Columbia, but the admissions process it's not the same thing. Okay, so some background and context. So I'm from Long Island, New York, and I went to a below average public high school in Nassau County, Long Island. So to be clear, I did not go to a feeder school. I did not go to a top private school. I just went to a below average public school. I went to the high school that was closest to my house. And so I'm a Chinese female, and my intended majors upon applying were statistics or data science or any variation of such. And I'm not first generation, I'm not legacy to T20s or IVs, and I'm not a recruited athlete. And so these are my statistics from my 4 years of high school, including 2 high school courses I took while I was in 8th grade. So my GPA was 100.407 out of 100, so that's weighted. My unweighted was 96.5, and our school doesn't do the GPA on the 4 or 5 scale. I know most of your schools do, but if it did, I honestly don't know what it would have come out as. I'm guessing probably around 4. And so my class rank was 14 of 299, which is the top 5%. So most schools, they don't really do ranks anymore, and if they do, they don't do exact ranks like our school does. And in fact, our school is getting rid of it very soon. And so if your school doesn't rank, or if they only rank the valedictorian, salutatorian, like it's not a big deal. Like ranking, it seems to be like getting less and less popular. It seems to be like more and more schools are moving away from that. And so my SAT from December 2020, so I took it once. I did not super score anything. I got 1540, so 760 on the reading and writing section and 780 on math. And the PSAT is out of 1520, and I got 1440 on that. That was during my junior year, so 710 reading and writing and 730 math, and that got me the National Merit Commended Student. So just a disclaimer, that's different from the National Merit semi-finalist or finalist. I was not either of those. I was just a commended student. And my AP scores, so this is from freshman year to junior year only, because the ones in senior year, obviously I did not have the scores by the time I was applying to college. So they're listed there. So from freshman to junior year, I had a total of 6, and then I did 5 in senior year. So they're listed there with the scores that I reported for you to see. And so this was my high school course selection. So I'm not going to read it all, but you can take a minute to look through that. So just some basic facts about this is that I did band for all my years at the school. So I go to a combined junior senior high school, and so from 7th grade onward I was in band. I mostly from 9th grade on was mostly stuck with advanced and AP classes. I did have a lunch every single year except for 12th grade. So that just gives you an idea of the course load and how rigorous it might have been. So the advanced classes at my school were weighted by 5%, and the AP classes were weighted by 8%, which is how the final GPA came up to be above 100. A lot of people at my school have that. When you put on the weight, it usually goes above 100. And if you're on a 4 or 5 system, that would usually mean that your GPA would be between 4 and 5, even though if it were unweighted, 4 is generally the highest you would get. So this is just what to keep in mind for course selection. So the first thing to know is that your GPA is very important. So your GPA is more important than your test scores. If you have a low GPA and high test scores, you're going to find that it's going to be a little difficult to get into some of the T20s or more elite schools. But your GPA is still second to your course rigor, which means that you need to take not necessarily need, but to make yourself as competitive as possible, it's advised to take the most rigorous or most difficult courses in the direction you intend to go in. But you should also know your limits, and so you shouldn't overload. More than 5 APs in one school year is probably not the best idea. I would say even five is pushing it a little bit, at least in my experience. But I don't know, some of you, I'm sure, are very smart or you're very capable, and I'm sure there are many people out there who can do 7 or 8 at once, but at least in my experience, 5 is like where I would cap it. So your context is considered when your application is being read. So if your school doesn't offer a certain AP, you won't get penalized for not having it. So for example, my school actually doesn't have French for the seniors. So I took French until 11th grade, and then we didn't have enough people to have a senior class, as it is with every year with French. It's just not very popular where I live, and so we didn't even have we didn't have a senior class for French, let alone AP French. So I didn't take AP French, and I can't imagine that would have hurt me in any way, because it just wasn't an option at my school. Now, that being said, you should still choose the most rigorous courses available in the direction that you want to build on. So if you're thinking about going into medicine, pre-med students would most definitely be expected to have AP Biology and AP Chemistry on their transcript before they graduate. And music and arts are not for everyone, but if you stick with it all the way, it shows a lot of dedication and commitment. And the last one, I said to keep lunch in your schedule if possible. Honestly, that's a personal choice, and you're honestly all welcome to do whatever you want with regards to that. But I just felt like, personally, like dropping lunch is not something I would advise, especially after having gone through it once. So these were my extracurriculars as listed on Common App. So Common App gives you a lot of different categories when you go through when you start listing your extracurriculars. There's music, there's sports, the community service, there's work and employment. There's a lot of different categories, and you would just select the category that whatever your extracurricular was, and then you would type in what it was, you would type in what organization it was affiliated with, if it was affiliated with an organization, and then you would give the years you did it in school. So if you did it from 9th grade onward, or from 10th grade onward, just senior year, or whatever it might be. So they don't care about what you did before 9th grade, they only care about high school. And so these are just my extracurriculars, and again, like whether or not your extracurriculars match with me, it doesn't matter. I know, like, I'm not a debate person, and I know some of you here, I'm sure, are very, very good at debate, or very, very good at Model UN, and like that's something that's something to be proud of. There's also some of you, I'm sure, are like math Olympiad winners, science Olympiad winners, like AMC finalists, or whatever it may be. You might have done a lot of research, and you might have a lot of awards from that. All of that is fine. Like, these are my extracurriculars, and yours do not have to match mine in any way. It doesn't mean anything for like how they compare to mine doesn't mean anything for how well your chances are going to be for getting into schools. Like everyone has their different things going on, and honestly every year, like what extracurriculars the admissions officers are looking for, depending on what kind of pools they're looking for and what kind of students they're targeting. And so one, like for example, one year they might need a lot of people who are really good at debate, like if they're trying to develop their debate team. And so maybe like you would all get lucky that year if you do debate, and like so on and so forth. Like there's many different variations and many different things that people are good at. And but at the end of the day, no matter what they're looking for, like they need a diverse, every single college wants to admit a diverse group of students. And so the extracurriculars you have, like if you're, as long as you're good at it and you like it and you're doing well and you're making contributions, maybe you have a leadership position or whatever, all of that works and all of that is fine. And so these are my awards and honors. So the Common App allows you to list 5 on your application. And so I had the National Merit Commended Student from the PSAT. And again, this is not the same thing as the National Merit semifinalist. My score was not high enough to reach that. I just want to make that clear. So don't get that confused with the semifinalist or finalist. And I also had the President's Volunteer Service Award. A large part of those hours came from TGC. The Springfield College Book Award was a junior award that was given at my school, and so I had another award from a regional music competition I did, and I also listed a bunch of honor societies as the 5th award. Now, there was like people have asked in the past like whether or not you put your AP Scholar Awards in this section. So I did have it in there at one point, but then I took it out after I got another one. So the AP Scholar Awards, frankly, they're discontinuing them now, so it doesn't really matter at this point. And even so, if you send your AP scores to them or if you self-report them, they can tell like which awards you would have gotten when the awards were being considered. So whether or not you have them, like if all your AP scores are good and if you show them, then the admissions officers will know that when the AP awards were being given out, this was something that you would have qualified for. And for self-reporting scores, just keep in mind again that there's no way to lie about that. And so I don't think anybody would really do this, or most people wouldn't do this, but just keep in mind that all of those scores are verified after you've been admitted. Yes, you can self-report, but just keep in mind that you're going to have to send official reports after that. So these are the list of schools I was accepted to. So I'm committed to Barnard, and I was also accepted to Vanderbilt, Michigan, Cornell, Wellesley, Smith, Grinnell, Stony, and Boston University. So Cornell University is a transfer option. So before anyone thinks that or whatever, I did not get in for this fall. I've been admitted through a transfer option for the fall of 2023. So if I were to go and pursue that, I would be spending my first year at Barnard, and I would be taking making sure I took all the necessary requirements to transfer to Cornell if that's what I wanted to do. Now I'm still thinking about that, but that's besides the point, because I anticipate that I'm going to go to Barnard for all 4 years. And so this is by no means the only schools I applied to. I'll be honest, I applied to 20 schools. And so what you see here, this is where I got into. Okay, and so preparing for the SAT, so I know a lot of people have asked this. I have no experience with SAT prep classes, so I did study for the SAT by myself. I didn't go to test takers or any of those other likewise organizations, so I had no prep classes, but I did buy some books that I felt like really helped me. So the SAT Black Book, I can't recommend this enough, especially for the reading and writing section. It changes your perspective on the SAT and what it's meant to do. And so I won't really go in depth about that, like, because the book has more details, but that one I would recommend for the reading and writing section only, because the math section is not really that detailed. But the College Panda SAT, so this is a math book. I would recommend that for math. The questions there are harder than what you would expect on the actual SAT math section, but you'll find that actually prepares you very well for it. And the College Board Blue Book, it's like the really fat like blue book with all the practice tests in it. So it's recommended to buy because it has all of the practice SAT practice tests in it, but those practice tests are also available for free on Khan Academy. So I don't really feel like any of the anything that was in that book was very helpful to me other than the practice tests. And like if you don't buy it, like again, all those practice tests are available for free on Khan Academy. You just have to set it up. It's really simple. And while we're on the topic of the SAT, so because of COVID, I'm sure you're all aware of this thing called test optional now. So for the upcoming application cycle, most colleges have gone test optional again. So they have been test optional for the class of 2021-2025. They were test optional for my application season, and they will be test optional again. And I believe Harvard has even extended that through 2028 or possibly further. I'm not 100% clear on that, but so most colleges have gone test optional. And what that means is you don't have to submit SAT and ACT scores. And this started because of COVID and because all these SAT centers and all these like ACT center testing centers, they were shutting down. And so people didn't really have the option to be able to so like in some places people didn't have the option, or they just didn't, it wasn't available in their region for them to go take these test scores. And so colleges will evaluate your application holistically, and we'll get more into what that means later. But a lack of test scores will mean that there's more emphasis on your GPA and other parts of your application. And test optional, it doesn't mean that you're screwed by any means. If you look at the statistics of a lot of the class of 2026 and 2025 profiles of a lot of like even a lot of selective colleges, you'll see a large percent of the people they admit actually did go test optional. So they do take into account like your circumstances, and there's an optional section on the Common App that actually allows you to elaborate on elaborate on certain circumstances. So if you don't have an SAT or ACT score submitted, like that would be the place to talk about it if there was a specific reason for that, like if you weren't able to get to a testing center in time or anything of that nature. And so again, a combination of high test scores and a low GPA is not enough for T20s and other competitive colleges. And I don't mean like low GPA as in, oh, like you were ranked like in the 30s or 40s. Like I mean like low GPA as in like it's significantly lower than what someone would expect in comparison to your test scores. I mean like if your test score is really high, but your GPA is like not at like 4, or it's like significantly lower than that, that's a combination that like in what I've seen, like it doesn't really work for competitive colleges. Okay, so the difference between early decision, early action, restrictive early action, and regular decision. So this is really common. A lot of people want to know about this. So early decision just means that your decision will be received in December. So you submit your application usually by November 1st or November 15th, and then the admissions committee will make a decision by December, and you'll receive that decision usually in the week of December 15th. So early decision is binding. So if you're accepted, and so after you're accepted, then you'll get your financial aid usually with your decision or shortly after. And once you get that financial aid package and you see that like, and the financial aid is satisfactory, you're morally obligated to withdraw all of your other applications, because now you're bound to that school. You signed the binding decision, your counselor signed the binding decision, your parent probably signed off on it too. So to sign off on this whole contract, it's a really big deal. You commit yourself to that school if you get it. And this actually provides a huge advantage for a lot of top schools. So a lot of these schools, you would notice that their acceptance rate is very low during the regular decision. Northwestern is the greatest example of this. So Northwestern, as you might know, is a T10 school. It's very well acclaimed, especially for STEM. And their regular decision acceptance rate is lower than 10%. But if you look at the early decision figure, it's actually in the around 35 or 36%, I believe. So it's a big advantage, because by the time you get to regular decision, most people are gunning for like Ivies, and they're trying to go for like Harvard, for Yale or schools like that. And so and there's a larger amount of applications then because it's not binding. But in early decision, when if you bind yourself to a school, like right away, the school will be more likely to accept more because they know that everyone they accept is going to come. And so Northwestern's not the only one that has that drastic difference. Actually, if you look at schools like Washington University in St. Louis, their regular decision figure I believe is around 13 or 15, but their early decision is in the 40s. So there really is a big advantage, but you have to be sure that that's the school you want to go to, and you have to be sure that financially it's feasible. I'll get back to that later. So early action's a little bit different. So usually you also submit your application by November 1st or November 15th or somewhere around early November. The latest early action I believe can go all the way to December 1st in terms of the application deadline. Then after that, your decision will be received in December or January or February, usually around that range. Most early actions now, I believe, come out at the end of January, but there's some variation on that. And so this decision is not binding, but you will receive your decision early. And so that'll help you, so it might help you make your decision sooner. Of course, if you get deferred, that doesn't really help you. You're still gonna have to wait until April 1st to get your decision, which kind of sucks, but sometimes it just is what it is. And so restrictive early action, so the most famous schools that have this are Harvard, Yale, and Princeton. MIT has early action, but it's not restrictive. So the decision is received usually in December and it's not binding, but you cannot apply early decision to anywhere, and you cannot apply early action to another private institution. So, for example, MIT is a private institution, so is Harvard. So if you apply restrictive early action to Harvard, you can't apply early action to MIT. And depending on the school, like there's some like fluctuation, like there's some like every school has different like rules regarding restrictive early action. I think like Notre Dame's restrictive early action is slightly different, although I'm not 100% sure. You would have to again look up on the school's website for the exact details. But in my experience, this is the general idea for what restrictive early action does. And regular decision is the most common one. Most of you will go through with this one, whether for financial reasons or because you're not sure where you want to go or whatever. But so it's just you submit your application by like the first week of January, and your decision will be received by April 1st, and it's not binding. And then you'll have until May 1st to make that decision. And so these are just some things to keep in mind with early decisions. So every year, like people ask, oh, like should I do early decision? Which school should I do early decision to? And some people treat it almost as like a joke or a way to like, oh, if I do early decision, I'll get into this school where I wouldn't have gotten in regular decision. And that's not really a good way to look at it, because early decision is binding. So you have to make sure no matter how low or how high your chances are at that school, that you've decided that this is where you want to go and this is where you want to be for the next 4 years, because there's a chance that you will get accepted no matter how selective that school is. If you do early decision, there's a chance that you'll get accepted. And so like I mentioned before, when you sign that agreement, you agree that you will go to that school if accepted and if your financial aid is satisfactory. So money, I know college is getting more and more expensive, and so money is a big deal for some families. For other families, maybe not so much, but whatever the situation with money is, you need to make sure you run the net price calculator, also commonly called the NPC, for that school. And so what this is if you go on the website, you look up net price calculator, it'll usually come up right away. Then you need to get your parents' tax returns from the previous year. So if you're applying to college this fall, you'll need your parents' 2021 tax returns and all the information, like everything with the IRS and everything that goes on with that. And so you'll need that, and then it'll ask you a bunch of questions regarding that, like how much your parents make, about everything else like financially related that I'm not really going to go into because I don't understand it personally. But once you enter in all of that information, the net price calculator will spit back a price at you. It's an estimate of how much you would be expected to pay. The total cost of attendance, including like your tuition, like your dorming, including everything. It's a cost of attendance price that's given back to you. It's an estimate based on how much your family makes and what information they expect to receive from you through the FAFSA and the CSS. And so if you run the net price calculator and you and your family are 100% comfortable with the price listed, then and you know that this is the school that you want to go to without a doubt for the next 4 years, then yeah, you would go ahead and you would sign the ED agreement and then you would apply to that school. Now, sometimes like the net price calculator, like sometimes it isn't accurate, like it does happen. In that case, like if the cost is too much, before you withdraw, you have to appeal. If the net price calculator gives you a number and the number that you get back after being accepted is significantly higher, you have every grounds and every right to appeal that and to like ask the school to give you the same amount of financial aid as was listed. And now, like sometimes that doesn't work out. There are other things that happen with the finances. If it really is too much money, then you can pull out of the early decision agreement. But if you're worried about that happening at all, I would suggest not going through with early decision, because if you pull out of an early decision agreement, your high school is very likely to get blacklisted. And all of the years after that, you'll probably find that the students who want to apply ED to that same school will not get in because of that reason. And like it sucks, and like sometimes like things happen that we don't anticipate, but you do have to be very clear on like the money and on the financials, and you have to make sure that you're comfortable with that before you go ahead and apply early decision. Now, choosing a major, so applying undecided is really not advised. So, and to be honest, when I was in the spring of my junior year, I still didn't really know what I wanted to apply as. And to be honest, like I'm still not sure if I'll change my major again. Like most colleges don't admit by major. So again, like they'll take it into consideration, but they don't admit by major. So it's usually very easy to change your major once you get in, with the exception of some schools like Cornell and like Carnegie Mellon, because they do admit by major. But still that being said, it's not advised to apply undecided, because some colleges may view you as unmarketable, or they're not sure like what you're gonna do or like what you're gonna be able to contribute after you graduate, because remember, they want to admit people who will give them a good name and a good reputation, and ultimately that will donate back to the school in some cases. So they're a business, and they want people who will make them look good, essentially. And so if you apply undecided, it won't be like, I've had friends say that it's not marketable and that like it's a little bit of a disadvantage, and I'm not sure just exactly how true it is, but I do know that like I said, the colleges, these are a business. Their alumni are very important to them, and they want all their alumni to be successful. And so I think maybe that's why. Although I'm not 100, I did not apply undecided. I had a friend who did, and she still got into a bunch of good schools. And honestly, if you absolutely don't know what you want to do, and if you're really struggling here and you just don't know, then I don't really, personally, I don't see anything stopping you from applying undecided, but I've just been told that it's not advised. But again, and now if you don't want to apply undecided, just choose a major that best matches your application. Like just look at your extracurriculars, look at your grades, take a look, oh, am I more STEM based, am I more humanities based, like what am I good at, and just put it in and just apply as that major. You usually won't have any trouble switching after you get into that college. So universities versus liberal arts schools. So this is another important distinction to make, because every year people just want to know what the difference is. So the university has a comprehensive list of majors, and it usually includes all kinds of engineering majors. Most universities will not admit by majors. Like there are some exceptions that I listed on the previous slide, and there's probably more schools that do admit by major that I'm just not aware of. but universities usually have a larger student population and are usually co-educational, meaning you'll see guys and girls there and all kinds alike. So liberal arts schools are usually called colleges, and they do not have as many majors as universities. So the main distinction between an institution being called university and college is usually the number of majors. And so liberal arts colleges are unfortunately usually lacking in the engineering department. So if that's the direction that you would go in, then a liberal arts school is probably not the place you might want to be. Although some liberal arts schools do have combined programs with some big universities that will allow you to get an engineering degree along with a degree from your liberal arts school in 5 years or so. But that I was just looking more into that, and so none of them admit by major. So by default, all liberal arts students declare their majors at the end of their sophomore year. So none of them admit by major. They will ask you what you want to major in to get an idea, but none of them admit by major. So you have a lot of flexibility. And they usually have smaller student populations. Usually the overall size of a liberal arts college ranges from 1 to 3,000, while universities, depending on the size, are at least in the are usually between 10 and 50 or 60,000. And so this includes both co-ed and the Seven Sisters schools. So the Seven Sisters schools it's just a bunch of all girls liberal arts schools. Barnard is one of them. And so I will be going to Seven Sisters school. So basic tips for writing the Common App essay. The first thing to know is that you should write first and then master the prompt later. Like every year people they just excuse me. Okay. So every year a lot of people, they panic about the prompt, like, oh, nothing, what I want to say, it doesn't match the prompt, or I don't know if it'll match the prompt, or I can't think of anything that'll match any of the prompts. Write it first and then match it to the prompt later. Most of the times you realize that most of the things that people write fit prompt 1, even if you're intentionally trying to avoid prompt 1, which is about some interest or some talent, something that you feel is very important to your identity. Even if you're actively trying to avoid prompt 1, which I was trying to do, I ended up still doing prompt 1. And that's just how it is. Like a lot, like you are giving them a piece of yourself, and so that's why most of the time it will fit prompt 1. But other than that, there's 6 other prompts there that you could totally fit. I'm sure a bunch of the other prompts are used very much as well. And prompt 7 is the one that says to just share an essay on your choice. It's completely open-ended. And if you find that your essay doesn't match any of the prompts, you could probably fit it into prompt 7. And so authenticity is very important. You want to make sure that whatever you're writing sounds like you wrote it. And if you're like a serious person, then your essay will be serious. If you're a funny person, then your essay will be more humorous. Don't try to be someone who you're not. And don't try to look up a bunch of big vocab words and put them in just because you think that'll impress admissions officers. Admissions officers will actually find that strange. They'll probably think that nobody talks like that if you're doing something like that. Unless, of course, you do talk like that, then that's different. But most of the time, like a high schooler would not talk with a bunch of big vocab words in every other sentence. So I would actually advise against that. So don't try to say too much at once. Remember, you do only have 650 words, and that sounds like a lot, but it's really not that much. And so don't try to say too much at once. Simple things can go a long way. You don't have to have cured cancer or brought about world peace or done anything major or national. You don't necessarily have to have gone through with all of that. It could be something very simple, a very simple community contribution. As long as you tie your story to a larger message about what you learned and make connections with that within your life and different milestones or whatever it may be, you're gonna be fine. And if you have further more detailed questions about how you should write or how you should structure your paragraphs, or like which phrases you should include or not, I would actually suggest asking someone who's a little more qualified in this area because other than writing my own essays, I don't have that much experience with this. So this is just what I learned based on the process I was writing it. And you might not love like your first draft or even your second draft. I think I wrote 2 or 3 different essays before I got the one I wanted. And that's okay. Like it's a process, and don't procrastinate. Like especially not on your Common App essay. I had a friend who was writing it on the day of the deadline, and I mean it worked out for him, but I would not suggest that you do something like that. So try to avoid essays about controversial topics such as mental health, depression, religion usually goes in there too. There are ways to write essays on that topic that can deliver it well. There are ways to make it work, but you would have to talk to someone who's more qualified about that. Because I didn't write about that, and it's like a little bit of a sensitive thing. Like if you mention things that that usually come with a trigger warning, like it's usually not considered to be a good idea. And the last one is kind of common sense, but do not admit to any illegal or immoral behavior. That is not going to do you any favors at all. Okay, so for supplemental essays, so if you don't know what supplemental essays are, these are essays that are specific to the school. So most schools will ask you, why do you want to go to this school? Like, oh, why Columbia? Why Harvard? Why Yale? Or things like that. And so with why essays, you want to be as specific as possible. You have to research the school in question and don't get any facts about the school wrong. It's very important that you don't mess that up, because then it looks like you were careless or that you didn't care enough to look up the correct information. And there are strict word limits on supplemental essays. Usually the limit will be between 200 and 600 words. Most of those tend to be on the lower side, on the 200 to 300 word limit part. And don't try to get too fancy. Sometimes simple is better. If you get right to the point and you're very clear and concise in what you want to say, and it's very obvious what you're trying to say, usually that accomplishes the point better than something where you try to write more or include more words, or like squeeze everything you want to say in, but most of it is irrelevant. That usually doesn't get the point across, and it won't do you any favors with the admissions officers. So quality is over quantity. Definitely quality over quantity. If you're not at the word limit, it's not the end of the world, but but that being said, try not to be more than 100 words below the limit. The thing with supplementals is usually people struggle to fit it in the right amount of words. And if it's a 500 word essay and you're at like 200 or 300 words, that probably doesn't. It's not saying that it won't work for you, but in general, if the word limit is at 500, you want to be at least around that 400 to 500 range. So this is just a few reminders of what not to do. So do not apply to more than one school early decision. Even if you think that you're definitely not going to get into one of them, and that you have no chance, and that you're just doing it to see what will happen, it can happen. Like I said before at the very beginning, college admissions are a gamble. You don't know there's no guarantee that you will or won't get into any school. And if you apply to more than one school early decision and you get into both, you're not going to be headed for a very good, you're not in a very good position, because then, yeah, you will be in trouble. And if you fail to withdraw other applications after you've been accepted to early decision and your financial aid is satisfactory, you will make a lot of enemies. People will hate you. They will think that you're taking their spots at these schools. So definitely don't do that. That is unethical and is definitely frowned upon. So don't procrastinate. And this is probably really hard for most people to do. And every year there are people who are like waiting till the last minute, applying 10 minutes before the deadline. Like, it happens. But if you can, try not to procrastinate. If you're a rising senior right now, you have the whole summer ahead of you still. You can draft your Common App essays after the the supplemental essay prompts come up around August, you can start looking at those too. So try not to procrastinate, because once you get into your senior year, especially if you're juggling like a schedule with 3 to 5 APs and you have extracurriculars, sports, and everything else on top of that, you're gonna find that those deadlines are gonna come up faster than you think you are. So while you have faster than you think they are, excuse me. So while you have free time now, like start to think about that a little bit. And so do not apply to no safeties. So I feel like, again, every year there's those people who think that they're good enough and that they only need to apply to T20 schools and not apply to any safeties. You have to apply to safeties. If you plan to, unless you plan to take a gap year, or if you think it's okay, or if you're planning on, oh, maybe I don't need to go to college, and you know, that's fine. Not everyone, it's not for everyone. You don't necessarily need to go to college to be successful in today's day and age. But if it is your full intention to go to college starting in fall 2023, or like whenever beyond that, or whenever you apply, so I should rephrase. I should say, if you intend to go to college as soon as you get out of high school, essentially after the summer, then definitely apply to some safeties. That way, you can guarantee that you'll have somewhere to go if all else fails. So a safety school, it's different for everyone. You have, it depends on your stats. It depends on the context of the school, and I would ask your counselors about that, because they understand more based on your stats and based on the history of people who have applied to different schools from your high school, which schools would be considered a safety for you and which schools would be considered targets or reaches. Definitely don't get into any trouble or let your grades tank senior year. And so after everyone submits their applications, like the general attitude is that people stop caring. And I'll admit it, there have been moments where I've just been like, whatever, like after January, but don't let your grades tank. This is very important, especially if you plan on transferring, or if you think you might be transferring schools after your freshman year, because if you're transferring, the institution that you want to transfer to will look at your senior transcript. And now, if you don't plan on transferring and you're usually an A student and then you're getting like 2 or 3 Bs, or you have 1 C, will you get rescinded? No, you won't. But it's probably it's not very good to let that happen. I had a friend who he was in 2021, right, 2025. So he did get an early decision to a school, and then he kind of stopped caring. And then one of the final grades in his class was, I believe it was like in around C or something like that. And his college actually reached out and asked him if he was okay and if he needed any help, and like if he needed any like mental health services or something like that. And yeah, it's not necessarily like the end of the world. And the colleges, like, unless you're like failing every single one of your classes or failing most of your classes, like you probably won't get your offer of admission rescinded. But I don't think anybody wants to be in that position. And I don't think most people, like, you wouldn't want to have a Zoom call with an admissions officer asking you if you're okay. Like, you wouldn't want to be in that position at all. So try to avoid that if you can. And if you don't get into like the school you want, if you don't get into a really competitive school, it's normal to be upset. Like, that's fine, no matter how competitive, how selective, or how crazy it seemed like to be, like a certain school seemed to be. You have every right to be upset, but don't panic. And I'm sure everyone has told you this, that like, oh, it doesn't matter where you go as long as you work hard, or like you're not defined by where you go to college, you're not defined by your stats. And like, I'm not going to repeat that again, because I'm sure all of you know somewhere deep down that that's true. But the chances are, like, even if you do feel really bad after you get rejected, or if you get deferred, or if you don't get the result you want, I would say 9 times out of 10 it'll all work out for you in the end. So I did not get into my early decision school, and I definitely had some disappointing results, but I'm very happy with how everything turned out. So that's the main thing to keep in mind, that as I always say, like, when one door closes, like another door opens, or like rejection is like, what is that other phrase? Rejection is redirection. It's true. like all of it is true, and it'll be a while before you realize that, and it took me all of my senior year to realize that, but all of it is true. Even if you don't believe it now, you'll realize it when the time comes. Okay, so I mentioned holistic before, so every single college tells you, oh, we review applicants holistically, and so like I'm pretty sure like the Ivies have that, a lot of T20s, a lot of T50s, like everyone says they review your application holistically, and what that really means is that your grades, either fortunately or unfortunately, depending on what kind of applicant you are, your grades are not enough. And so you'll also need good essays, you'll need extracurriculars, you'll need strong letters of recommendation. They have a lot of weight. And again, like I said before, a low GPA and high test scores are also not enough if you want to aim for really competitive colleges. And stats are absolutely crucial to the admissions process. Like the 25th, 50th, and 70th percentiles for test scores and GPAs of certain schools, they usually have all of that. You can find it online. You'll see like for a certain school, the 75th percentile for the SAT score, maybe like 1500, 1400, depending on what school it is. And you should take that into consideration. If your SAT scores and GPA are above average, or like around the 75th or even above the 75th percentile for a school, like you're going to pass the initial round when they look over the application. More likely than not, you will pass the initial round. And so stats are still very crucial to the process. But nobody, and I say nobody, gets into college based just on their stats, unless there might be like some extreme cases, but you would have to be like your numbers would have to be really, really high for that. And but for most of us, nobody got in just based on their stats. You need to have a good essay. You need to have strong extracurriculars and letters of recommendation. Letters of recommendation can be makes or breaks sometimes. If you have strong connections, or if you have a teacher who feels very strongly about you, and the recommendation letter is good, all of those are very, very helpful. And so to create a college list, remember what I said before about you need to have safeties, you need to have targets, and you need to have, you don't need to have reaches. And honestly, you don't even need to have targets if you don't want to. It depends on which school you want to go to. But I imagine that most people here will have safeties, targets, and reaches. So like I said, even though stats will not be the only reason why you get into a school, you have to keep in mind what your statistics are. And like, as much as like I would love to say, oh, like test scores, they don't matter, and like you could have really test scores and you could still get into grade school, and it might be, and that's true, all of it is true, but at the end of the day, there's a difference between a 4.5 GPA and a 3.9 GPA. There's a difference between 1500 and 1400, and you do have to keep in mind what your statistics are and which schools will and like which schools like you might fall into the range of, and think about what you want to do and your intended major. So different schools are stronger in different areas. So if you're a pre-med student, like I'm sure if you're a high achieving pre-med student, you're looking at Hopkins or Northwestern or something like that. And if you're more humanities based and you're looking for reach schools like Harvard, Yale, or maybe even like a little lower, like a little not lower, or like something that's not as hard to get into, like I can't really think of them off the top of my head, but just keep in mind that different schools are good at different things, and that the strength of an academic program is very important. Now, like I said, your list should definitely have safety schools on it, at least one or two that you're sure you'll get into based on your stats and based on what your counselor tells you. You can apply to as many reaches and targets as you like, and again, your guidance counselors are more aware of your stats and where you stand, so definitely talk with them. You should keep in mind the cost of application fees. You can apply to as many schools as you want, but if you don't have any waivers, or if you don't have application fee waivers or things like that, the number can go up really quickly, really soon. And again, like I don't know what the situation is with that, or like with the cost of application fees. For some people it matters a lot. For other people, they don't care at all how much money they spend on applications, and that's a personal choice. You do whatever you want, but it's just something to keep in the back of your mind. And like I mentioned earlier, I did apply to 20 schools. It worked for me, and I'm glad I did, but in general, I would not recommend doing such a thing. It's a lot. Like, it's a lot of essays. um it's a lot of supplemental essays to write. It's a lot of work, and personally, 10 to 15 or less is the range that most people go for. And um many of my friends did not apply to 20 schools. They applied to 15 or like 12 or 10 or less, and everything worked out for everyone for the most part. So you don't need to apply to 20 schools. um and I know, like, that might be hard to believe now, because in recent years, like with test optional, the number of applicants has been going up a lot, and we now have this practice called shotgunning, where everyone just applies to a bunch of top 20 schools or a bunch of really elite schools, just to see what happens. And, like, there's a lot of tension surrounding that. There's a lot of controversy around that, and if that's what you want to do, that nobody's really stopping you. Like, what you do with your application and with all of that money, like, it's completely up to you. But like I said, I would not recommend applying to 20 schools. Like, 10 to 15 is always in my mind at least, 10 to 15 or less is the ideal amount. Okay. So another thing I wanted to address, again, with financials versus prestige. So college is very expensive, like very, very expensive. Like, you don't know how much 80K is until you sit down and, like, you're about to pay it off with loans, or like your parents are about to help you pay it off. College is very expensive. And if you are like, and now, like, there's financial aid. Like, it depends on, like, your family situation, and you may get good aid, you may not. It depends. But college is expensive, and that amount of money, it's not like, even that amount of money, it's not a small deal. And so debt is, like, not a good thing. Even if you can, quote unquote, easily pay it off, it's not a good thing. And you don't, like, nobody wants to walk out of school with debt. Now, there are, like, some government-based loans that generally most people take, that are considered to be reasonable amounts. But aside from that, if you're going like more than like 40, like 50K, 80K, 100K or more in debt, that's usually not a good thing. And especially if you are pre-med, pre-law, or pre-anything that requires grad school, keep in mind that those, like, going to those schools after undergrad will almost always require loans. Medical school, law school are very expensive. Almost everyone takes out loans for that. And so you got to think about, like, if you're taking out a lot of loans for undergrad, and then you're taking out a lot of loans for medical school or law school or whatever it may be, you're going to be paying that back until, like, well into the future. Like, you're going to spend decades paying that off. And so it's just something to keep in mind. And there are some colleges that are very generous with merit aid, such as Cornell and Smith. As per my experience, I did get substantial scholarships from them, which I'm very grateful for. And keep in mind that a good quality education at your state school may be just as good and also free of debt as compared to an education at a more prestigious school. And again, the amount that you're comfortable with spending, like, it depends entirely on you and your family, like, whether, if you're paying for college, if you're taking out loans and then paying it back, or like if you're paying for college, or if your parents are going to take care of it for you, or whatever it may be that's going on. That's a personal decision, and I'm not here to tell you what's right and what's wrong about how much to spend. And for some families, like, money is not a concern at all, and for others, money is a very big concern. And so it's just something to keep in mind. And for pre-med students, if you haven't heard of combined medical programs, these 8-year programs where they accept you like straight through, and they waive the MCAT requirement for you and all of that, they're very competitive to get into, but they are big money savers. So if you're pre-med, that is definitely something to consider. So, how to decide where to go? So, I'd imagine for most of you, this is still like well off. If you're a rising junior, uh, around you won't be decide. Most of you will not be deciding this until next April May, unless you get an early decision. In that case, you've already decided before you apply. So, just the main thing to remember is that nobody can make the decision for you. Not your friends, teachers, counselors, or even your parents. Of course, there's an exception there, like with the financials. If your parents are paying, you have to keep in mind what is affordable and what is not affordable. But still, nobody can make the final decision for you. And you have to make that decision yourself. You have to keep in mind all the factors. Again, like I mentioned before, I think that the strength of the academic program is the most important, other than cost. But all the other factors that everyone talks about, like the weather, the location, the social scene, or like, any connections they might have, like, or extracurriculars they want to participate in, like all of those things. Those are like, even no matter where they rank on your list, those are all things to consider. And you should keep that all in mind when you're deciding where to go. And so I just wanted to discuss briefly why I chose Barnard. So like I said, the strength of academic programs are very important to me. And so Barnard, with the major I wanted and with the connection to Columbia and the support from Columbia, that was important to me. So Barnard students can take classes at Columbia and vice versa. And so that was something that I really liked, because I believe that they both had very strong departments, and they boosted each other up, and made each other better because of that connection. And with the academics there, I thought that was something that I really liked. Barnard is a small liberal arts school. It has less than 3,000 students overall, and it might not feel, and again, because of the connection with Columbia, it probably feels a little bigger than that, but still, I really liked the sense of community I felt there. Like, I felt when I was going online and I was interacting with other people, like on social media, that everybody was very welcoming and that everyone was very supportive. And there were some other schools that I was considering that I just felt like they didn't have that same sense of community, and so that was something that put me more onto Barnard. And so the location, it's on the Upper West Side. It's in Manhattan, New York City. A lot of people want to from all over the nation want to come to New York, and they want to go to New York City for college. And that wasn't something that I really took for granted. So the culture and the goal of an all-women school, a lot of the Seven Sisters have this, where they preach about how they're building up the next generation of women leaders, strong women, independent women, and that was something that was very important to me as well. The class sizes, like, one of the many advantages of a liberal arts school is the class sizes. Especially as you get older, the number of people in the class narrows down to like 30 or 20 or less. The student to teacher ratio is the student faculty ratio is very good. And so that was something else that I really liked. And without getting too much into like details about like my personal financial situation, Barnard was compared to many other great options I had, Barnard was cheap. It was relatively cheap compared to some other schools that I was considering, and so that was a factor as well. And so a bunch of people were asking about suggested resume format. So I think I emailed you my resume template, right?
Yes.
So I could pull it up if you can't find it right now, but I'm not going to show you guys my actual resume because it has like some personal information on it that I'm not very like privacy. But so in general, at the top of your page, you would include your name in big bold letters, like with the email and cell phone underneath. Use your personal email, your school email. I'm sure many of you have been told this in the past, or you're aware that it will be discontinued by the time you graduate. And for some reason or whatever, like if your college needs to get in contact with you, or like if you're giving a resume to like whether it's for college or for a job or anything, like your personal email is more reliable. And so this is just a suggested order and categories because this is what I used. Honestly, you're welcome to categorize however you like, but I had like an order of like the like I had a category with honor societies, awards, then extracurriculars, employment, and community service after that. So, Ken, do you have the resume template or do you want me to share it?
I can share it.
Okay.
I'll share.
Okay. Okay, so we'll give Ken a second.
How's this?
Yeah.
Can you see it?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Right.
So you can just scroll down. So this was the formatting I used. I had honor societies at the top, and then I had awards, and then extracurriculars. I forgot to take out some of the descriptions, but there it is. So that's just the formatting I used, and you're welcome to use whatever formatting you want. This is just suggested.
Can you please
Is that
scroll
it,
up?
Miranda?
Oh,
Yes, of course.
Thank you.
Okay, so unless anybody else has any more questions about this or wants to scroll down or scroll up, I think you can stop sharing, Ken. So I can put the presentation. Okay, thanks. Okay, now before I get to the Q&A, as Ken and Candace mentioned, we're doing, so TGC is trying to do a website revamp fundraiser. So the TGC website is up, but it's not a professional website, and there's still a lot that can be that it can be built upon and improved on. And so I've been with TGC from just around the time when it just about first started at the end of 2020, and I'm really happy with how much it's grown and how much it's developed, and it's becoming a bigger and stronger organization. But the website, the thing with the website is it could still use a little more like a revamping as they're trying to do, and it could be upgraded to a professional website, and it would benefit all the volunteers and like all the students alike, especially if you're applying to college. You can take the professional website link and you can use it to showcase like your to showcase as part of your application, like the TGC part of your application. When I was applying to college, I used the website link we currently have, but if you look it up, but if you don't have that link, there would be no way for you to access the website. If you look up TGC, it still doesn't come up, and so it's just I think it's a very important cause and very important thing to do, to build up the website and upgrade it to more professional. And so whatever you can do to help support or to donate to this cause, like anything you can give, that would be appreciated if you can. Okay. And these were some other questions that people had sent to me that I didn't really get to address in the presentation. So the first one is, do I need like national or state level awards to get into a top college? And the answer is no, you don't. Like I said, there's no linear formula. There's no set way to get into a college or don't get into a college. I'm sure there are a lot of people with great national and state level awards, and I'm sure there's a good number of you in here who do have that, and that's great. I think you're all great, and yes, they will help if you have that. Absolutely, they will help, and they will be to your advantage. But just while like yes, like schools like Harvard and MIT, they have lots of people with like big national state level awards, but believe it or not, there are people at top schools who have extracurriculars that they were dedicated to, or awards for things that they genuinely cared about, that are not as well known, but they still got into schools for whatever reason, for their grades, for their commitment, because they were passionate about what they like. There's so many different ways and so many different things that admissions officers look for. And so the short answer is no, you don't need national or state level awards to get into a top college. But if you have them, that's great. They will help you. And so someone else asked me that if I were to go back and do it all again, so what would I have changed or done differently? So when I was in 9th grade, I wasn't very open-minded, to be honest. And there were some things that like I didn't think I would ever like that I ended up liking, and there were some things that I didn't ever want to try, but then I ended up wanting like ended up doing anyway. When I was in ninth grade, I didn't think I was gonna be a STEM major. I didn't. I remember I don't think I even liked math that much. Like I thought it was ridiculous. But the thing is, don't be so narrow-minded. Like you never know how many times you might change your mind. You never know like what life might throw at you. You never know what will happen, and you should keep an open mind. Like if it sounds interesting to you, or if you think that you might even remotely like it, like try it. Like if you don't like it, you can always stop. And so that's the main thing is keep an open mind about things that you might not ever think you did. I didn't do science research because I didn't think because I like I said I was really narrow-minded. I thought I hated science like at the time. And so again, like science research, I didn't do debate either. I didn't do a lot of things that I could have done or that I should at least should have tried to do. Um, and so that's absolutely I would do that differently. And so what is the transition like between middle and high school? So I mentioned before I go to a combined junior senior high school that has from grades 7 through 12. So I was at the same school from 8th grade to ninth grade. So I honestly I don't have that much information on this, but I will say that the course load gets heavier, and you'll have more responsibilities. And like ninth grade, that's when like your grades start to actually, like if you look at it solely in terms of a college admission standpoint, that's when your grades actually start to matter. Now of course if you were taking high school level classes before that go in your transcript, that would be different. Then it would start mattering before you got to ninth grade. But so I would say the biggest change is the change in course load and change in intensity and like the importance and emphasis on grades. And you just have to uh, it's just a thing of time management and understanding that there's just going to be more responsibility. So someone asked me what online classes I participated in, and it was kind of an ambiguous question. I wasn't sure exactly what kind of online classes they were referring to. um I didn't do any. I did do a college course at Stony Brook last summer. It was all online, and I did it for college credits, but it was like a summer class for credit, and I'm not 100% sure if that's what this person was referring to. But and if not, that if that's not what you were referring to, then no, I didn't do any online classes. And so, how do you effectively time manage in high school? Well, in general, a good rule of thumb is to start something the day you get it and not the day before it's due. Procrastination, procrastination does work for some people, but I would not suggest it. I don't think that it's a very good position to put yourself in. I don't think it's a very good thing to do. So as less procrastination as possible. Just if you know you're gonna have a lot of things coming up in one week, get everything done before that. Just and you know your schedule, and you know the things you have to do better than anyone else, and you know when you're gonna have free time and when you're gonna be busy. And so you gotta take that, you gotta take all your coursework, you gotta look at all those deadlines you have, and you gotta just arrange it around that, like in a calendar. You gotta put everything around that. And so what are someone else asked me efficient review and memory methods. So if your class is like a straight route memorization course, like if you're in like psychology, or if like it's a history class or something like or something like that, there really is no other way to do it except to look at it and memorize it. You can improve the memory if you make connections, or if you think of like different mnemonic devices or things like that. But other than that, there really is no other secret to classes that are just like route memorization. Now, for if it's like a conceptual course, like if you're talking about like math or physics or something that's very concept heavy, if you can't grasp the fundamental concepts, anything more than that is going to be very hard for you to grasp. So for conceptual classes, the main thing is if you have to first understand the most basic concepts, and then you can build up on that. Now, what are my views on PBL and Minerva online classes? I'm going to be completely honest, I don't know what those are. So unfortunately, I can't answer that question. So which direction should I head in if I have many preferences? So if you like many different things, you should try all of them. you should honestly like, maybe there are certain things you like more than others, and maybe you could focus on that more. um or you can build yourself, or you can like build up in like several different directions. Honestly, like, if you have time for it and if you feel like you can, then you should pursue everything you like, and that you should spend time, as much time as possible, on everything you like. And this last question, I wasn't really sure what it meant at first, but it said, how would you plan reasonably to achieve like a desired level within desired specialties during high school? So I take this to mean like, how do you achieve like maybe like a very high level at something? Um, so the thing with this is that if you want to be like very, very good at something, if you want to be a state level, national level, you kind of have to recognize it early on. Um, and if and you are going to have to dedicate many, many hours to it, probably more hours than most, or more hours than you might be willing to at first. So again, like, if you are, like, for example, going on the recruited athlete route, you'll probably be spending more time practicing for that sport than you will be for almost everything else, and that's just the way it's going to be if you want to achieve that level, where to be at that level, to be recruited. And so um and like, but if you're not like, I'm not really sure how to answer that, but I just know that like, if you recognize it early on, or if you realize early on that this is what you want to do, then you would just like, you would plan like now, like you would try like smaller competitions, and then like do like something, like slowly go higher and higher up, and slowly build upon like smaller and smaller accomplishments within that range. Okay, so that's all I have. So I don't know if there are any other questions or anything. So Ken and Candace, I'm gonna give it back to you guys to uh, do that.
There was one question going on while you were presenting. They were just asking, do you have any recommendations on books for college application essay?
Books, as in like what books you should read before college?
I'm not sure. They asked, can you recommend some books on college application essay?
Okay. I actually didn't read any of these, but there was one that was really like, that was popular in my friend group. A bunch of my friends were reading it. I believe it's called How to Write Your College Essay in One Night, or something like that. Let me look it up.
And also, if anybody have any questions, you guys can just send in the chat, and then Miranda can answer at this time.
Okay, how to write your college essay uh in less than a day. Okay, I believe this is the correct one. I'll put the link in the chat. So I honestly, I did not read this book, and I don't know how helpful it is, but I know it was very popular in my friend group. A bunch of my friends did. Okay, so how did you arrange your summers in high school? Did you do any summer camps? Yeah, so yeah, I did do summer camps. So I believe the summer before ninth grade. The summer before ninth grade, I did summer immersion at Columbia. And then the summer before 10th grade, I did the Manhattan School of Music summer camp. The summer before junior year was COVID, so I didn't really do anything except for study for the SAT. And then the summer before my senior year, I was working two jobs, and I was doing college classes, and I was doing a lot of volunteering. And so that was the busiest time. So the thing is, with summer camps, try to target the more competitive ones, the ones like, any program that's free is probably competitive. um there's a lot of summer camps that honestly, like, are probably not worth it, to be honest. And like, but it's up to you, and it's like up to what you think, and your decision personally to uh, pursue whatever summer camp you want. And honestly, at the end of the day, if you feel like you learned something, and if you got something out of that summer camp, no, like, no matter what the acceptance rate, or like where it was, or whatever it was doing, if you feel like you got something out of it, and if you had a good time, like, honestly, you should, like, that should not be considered wasted time or money. But yeah, but I would just say the summer before high school. My bad. The summer before your senior year is probably the the most important one for writing your essays and for building things up for your application. Okay, said, when did I start writing my college essays? So at my school, our 11th grade English teacher, so my AP Lang teacher, made us submit a copy of our Common App for an assignment, and it was under the understanding by no means that had to be our final draft, and we could always change our minds about it and write new ones. So the first essay I wrote was in June of 2021, and I applied starting in fall of 2021. So I started the process for writing essays about 4 or 5 months before it was due. It said, when did I first take the SAT? I took the SAT once in December of 2020. So to give you context for that, I started studying in June of 2020. Can I share the link for the SAT reading and writing book? Okay. Yes, I can. Let me find that. Okay, so that's the link for the black book. Let me find the college panda. And this is the college panda one. For math. Okay. You asked any advice for improving writing skills. I'm not sure if you're referring to writing like as in on the SAT or writing essays. So if you're talking about the SAT, honestly, for the writing section, it's just the grammar section. Honestly, I would refer to the books more for that because I'm not sure how qualified I actually am to give advice. I just read a lot of the prep books for that, and I took a lot of their advice. If you're talking about writing skills for your college essay, I would also further consult a professional for that. I'm not 100% qualified to give advice, but like I said, be as authentic as possible. Be as straightforward as possible. Don't try to add on fancy things or don't try to be someone you're not. Did I visit many colleges in person or do I do virtual tours? To be honest, I did not tour that many colleges before the application process, and I barely toured any after. So I did do a formal in-person tour of Vanderbilt when I was a freshman. So we went to Tennessee for vacation, and so I did do a formal tour of Vanderbilt. But other than that, I didn't do any in-person tours before COVID, no. And then after that, I did a virtual tour of Columbia. But I had been on the Columbia campus many times before for summer camps, so I was very familiar with Columbia. I also I toured Barnard. When I thought that I was going to commit to Barnard, I did tour Barnard. And then that was an in-person tour this past April, but that's it. Like, I didn't really do many tours. I did some information sessions where they give you, like, they answer more questions if you're a prospective student, and those are virtual, but yeah, that's pretty much it. For any books to recommend for the PSAT, the PSAT is a shorter version of the SAT, so the SAT books will work for that. Do I have a website to recommend for research on college admissions stats? I'm not really sure what you're talking about. Like college admission stats as in like the statistics like specific for a school. Usually you can find on the school websites, like if you're talking about like the SAT scores in that range, or like the SAT scores. Acceptance rate. Acceptance rates are on Google. There really is no other answer to that. Acceptance rates are on Google, but most of those rates are a little bit high, are pre-COVID numbers. So keep in mind that it will be a little lower For example, the acceptance rate for Northeastern this year was definitely not 20%. Let's see. But if you were talking about other admission statistics, like the 75th percentile for SATs, or the 75th percentile for a GPA, or like the 25th or 50th percentile for that, usually you can find that, like, if not on the school website, on other spots on Google. Did I use any off-school consulting services when applying for college, and is it worthwhile? So, like I said, I actually go to a below-average public school on Long Island, and no, I did not do any off-school consulting services. I was in my guidance counselor's office a lot. Like, I asked her. So I had one who was, so at the beginning of the year, my counselor was out on maternity leave. There was someone else filling in, and then she came back, and I asked both of them a lot of questions, and like, don't feel bad about that. Of course, don't be annoying and don't demand like anything like unreasonable out of your counselors, but your counselors are there to help you. And even if you don't think your school counselors are that great, or like if you don't think your school is like a very high quality of like advising or whatever, your counselors know more than you think they do. They know a lot more than you think they do. And so um I think like your counselors are always accessible to you. And this is their job. So you wouldn't have to pay for it like outside. So I and again, I don't have any experience with off-school consulting services, and I'm sure there are some of them that are very worthwhile, and I'm sure there are some of them that are very helpful, but if there are, I do not know of any of them. Okay, so I think that's the end, right? Okay, so I'm not sure if there are any more questions. Oh, SAT versus ACT, sorry. So I don't have experience with the ACT. To be honest, I went for the SAT because it seemed more popular at my school. And but in my experience, the SAT is easier questions. No, harder questions in more time, and the ACT is easier questions in less time. I might have that mixed up, but I'm pretty sure that's what it was. And the ACT, I think, has more reading. Although I'm honestly not sure. Like I said, I don't have that much experience with the ACT, but if you're like, but if let's say if you attempted the SAT a few times, it's not working out, then maybe you should think about switching, or like vice versa. Okay. Is there anything else? Okay. So thanks to everyone who's wishing me luck. I'll give it back to Candace and Ken.
Yeah, so thank you again, Miranda, for
Did we lost you?
Yeah,
I could.
I couldn't hear you for a second. Ken, you cut out.
Yeah, I crashed. So I was just gonna say thank you, Miranda. Congratulations on Barnard. Have a great time in college.
Yeah，再次感谢 Miranda 为大家带来的讲座，然后也恭喜 Miranda 哥伦比亚大学 Barnard College 的录取，祝你一切顺利。And then thanks everyone for attending，感谢大家的到来。Also, I shared my screen for additional information on the website revamp fundraiser. So if anybody wants to help support, all the information is on there. And if you have any questions, always WeChat communicate is fine. So yeah.
Yeah, I think everyone's heading out now, right? So
Yeah, okay.
okay.
All right.
Thanks,
Thank you
everyone.
guys.